Welcome to Midwest Small Town, the podcast that takes you on a journey through the heart of America and shines a light on the charming and often overlooked towns across the country, revealing where to go, stay, and play. Whether you're a traveler seeking adventure or a local looking for something new right in your own backyard, we've got you covered. So let's explore the soul of small town USA. Hello and welcome back to Midwest Small Town. This is Dan, your host.
And Tami.
And we're glad to be back with you. This is technically episode 1 because the first one we did is episode 0, kind of our trailer to tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, which is really highlighting all small town news across America. And of course, today we're going to talk about the small town of Charles City, Iowa, the hometown of Tami.
That's right. I spent my entire childhood living in Charles City, even living in the same home.
So tell me a little bit before we get too far along here. I don't know where Charles City is. Tell me a little bit about it. Can you kind of give us an example?
Oh, it's close to Mason City.
Okay, so Mason City, Iowa, how far?
It's about 40 minutes from Mason City.
Okay, 40 minutes east, and Mason City, Iowa is about 40 minutes, I'd say, from the Minnesota border, right on I-35, going straight south and north, right down the middle of Iowa. So that kind of gives you an idea of where it's at. And tell me a little bit about growing up in Charles City. Give me some of your stories.
I think one of the things I remember about growing up in Charles City, a small town, is I remember riding my bike everywhere. And I think that's one of the special things about small towns is you have that ability to get on your bike and go where you want to go, be with your friends, and still feel safe. I just remember there was a big group of us that when we were old enough, we put many miles on our bikes, riding all over town in the summer. I remember specifically when we'd go to the public pool, I remember we'd have to cross the swinging bridge. The swinging bridge was a suspension bridge. We called it the swinging bridge because it would swing if it was windy, or if you would walk or bike over it. You would feel it swing and move, and you would look down and see the water below you.
And why do they have the suspension bridge there?
So they had it. They built it actually in early 1900s, and it was just built to provide pedestrian access across the Cedar River. And it was 270 feet long. Basically, it was listed on the National Historic Registry of Historic Places. It was a beloved icon in the community. The bridge actually, though, was lost during the record floods in June of 2008.
I remember those floods. We had the same floods over in northwest Iowa as well. That was a really bad year. We even had some bad ones in the 90s as well. Mm-hmm. But this one took the bridge?
This took the bridge. So now, today, the swinging bridge is gone, and there is a new cable stay pedestrian bridge that was constructed in the same location, and it's been there since 2010.
So can you share some of your favorite things to do in Charles City?
Growing up?
Yeah, growing up.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? It was just a fun childhood. Growing up in Charles City was very simple. We loved to do things like going to the bowling alley or watching a movie at Charles Theater, which I think Dan and I went to our first movie together in Charles City. Do you remember what that movie was, Dan?
It was Dumb and Dumber. And I think the funniest thing was, at the time, my sense of humor, I think, has changed a little bit over time. And I was pretty dry, and so I remember walking out and saying to Tami, "Boy, that was dumb." Who would have thought that Dumb and Dumber would be dumb, right?
Your sense of humor has really gotten better since then.
So downtown Charles City has a movie theater, and we had some great memories with that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you knew this, Dan, but the Charles Theater is one of 2 Art Deco theaters that's still in operation in the state of Iowa.
Wow.
That's pretty special.
That's pretty cool.
Also growing up, we lived close to Sportsman's Park. And that's where the softball and baseball diamonds, I don't think they're there any longer. But we grew up really close to those diamonds. And I just remember spending a lot of summer nights watching softball games. We had an excellent tradition of having winning softball teams and went to state most summers. So that was just a really fun thing to do in the summer.
I remember that about Charles City. the Charles City Comets. Mm-hmm. I can't remember how many times that softball team was known as going to state.
For sure. In fact, I remember, I don't know if I think we were just dating, but we went to a state softball game that Charles City was in. And I think we were even in the Charles City Press. We made it into the paper.
I remember 4th of July, the parades that Charles City would have and so forth. So speaking of the parade and some other things like the 4th of July, are there any historical events that shape or has shaped the town's identity?
I think one of the things that Charles City is known for is, unfortunately, a devastating tornado that went through the town in 1968. So that was a few years before we were born. It was, like I said, it was devastating. There were 13 people that died. I didn't realize that it had destroyed so much of the downtown. There were 256 businesses and 1,250 homes that were damaged or destroyed in that tornado. And it is still one of the largest tornadoes that's ever been recorded in our state.
I remember talking to your dad about that tornado. He said that they could literally see from one side of town all the way through because there's just nothing left. Everything was flattened.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And here's another interesting thing, Tammy, that I'd like to bring about that tornado. So, you know me, I historically would cover ghost towns, and there was an episode I was working on, which was tornado ghost towns. And I remember researching that specific tornado, even though it didn't cause a ghost town, it was one of 2 F5 tornadoes in the state.
I think that's one of the special things about Charles City, though, is when that happened, they did not let that get them down. They really rebuilt the community, and they not only survived, but they really thrived.
Talking about that tornado because I didn't realize that it wasn't just Charles City. It actually went all the way down to Greene, Iowa. And so there was a person who I work with who I didn't know, she grew up in Greene. And she talked about that tornado, and I said, "Tell me more about that tornado. What?" And she's like, "Well, it was so big, Dan, that it literally lifted our house off the foundation, and then there was a tire that was around our bull's like neck out, and chickens and birds, everything was devastated. Mm-hmm. There were people lined up on the side of the roads for miles that came to help," and that's what she remembers.
Yeah, that's small town America.
Small town. So that was one. Is there any others?
Oh, for sure. I would say probably the best known thing about Charles City is the role that it's played in the history of the American tractor. Going back all the way to early 1900, the term tractor actually came from Floyd County. It was part of the unveiling of the Hart-Parr gasoline-powered tractor engine, or traction engine, I should say. That's where the first model of the tractor was made. Right there in Charles City.
Now, do they still? Because I always had that question. They used to have like that. It was like maybe a model tractor or something that kind of sat on the side of the road there by Highway 18.
I believe it's still there. Oliver Farm Equipment Company came into play and then later became known as White Farm New Idea Equipment Company.
I remember White Farm, at least hearing stories from your dad.
Yes.
Because your dad worked there, right, when he was younger?
Right, yes. In fact, I had my grandpa, Ramker. He worked there for 30 years and then even retired there, I believe, in 1980. The neat thing about White Farm is we grew up close to White Farm as well, and it really was a large plant. It encompassed 23 acres total and employed nearly 3,000 workers.
3,000, my goodness. Now,
it's a good amount.
Historically, and I'll let you kind of go into this because I know a little bit about this. So White Farm is no longer in Charles City.
Correct.
I don't know what happened there, but it downsized and it closed. They still exist, but just not in Charles City.
I think, too, the 1980s farm crisis was a huge contributor to that closing. It actually closed in 1993, which was the year that I graduated. I always knew White Farm to be there. Today, it is a vacant site, and maybe someday something will go up there.
So when Tami interviews me about my hometown, we also experienced a loss of a big corporate business as well. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that's not the end of the story for Charles City. And the cool thing is that economic development, all those people who are working so hard to when they lose a big business like this, there's two ways they can go. You can either decide that, well, we're going to wrap it in, we're done, we can't replace it, or you're going to work hard and find jobs for people. Now, it was a big downfall, though, right?
For sure.
For sure. And so there was a lot of lost jobs, and it took a while for Charles City really to recover from that.
Absolutely.
Some of the businesses that I know that they brought in, I know they brought in some tire businesses, and I know that Winnebago has done something as well in Charles City.
Definitely helped.
We'll definitely want to follow up on this. I'm hoping, if you are from Charles City, we'd love to hear from you. Tell me about some of the businesses that are going on right now in Charles City. Would love to know more about that. Would love to come and actually even give an update, because Tami right now is just talking about her memories growing up in Charles City. When you remember growing up in Charles City, tell me about some of the top attractions that you remember, or even some that you even know of.
Some of these here that I know of are still there, which is great. I know I talked about the Charles Theater. That is still there. That was originally constructed in the 1930s. It is still open for business, and they have redone it, and it's a neat place to go. It's just a one-screen theater. The Charles City Art Center is really neat. It's located, I know Dan likes this, in a Carnegie Library.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a neat place to visit if you are into art.
Are you trying to get me to start talking about Carnegie's? Because I could take over this podcast right now. I love Carnegie Libraries. This is a really neat building, by the way, that this is in.
For sure. And the Floyd County Historical Art Museum is really nice as well. It has a lot of the tractor history and a lot of tractors from...
I love that, any of that stuff that you just brought up. Tractor history. Again, remind me, how big is Charles City?
Charles City is about a little over 7,000 right now.
Okay, so it's a little over 7,000. Now think about that for a moment. You have a town a little over 7,000, has an art museum. It held on to its Carnegie Library, which is awesome, because a lot of those have lost their handicapped accessibility and are going away. So they found, a way they could utilize that building. That's awesome. Secondly, they have a tractor museum, and this is all in a town of under around 7,000.
One thing I didn't talk about, there's a place called Carrie Lane Chapman Cat, her girlhood home and museum. She is known for she lived on a farm south of Charles City. She's well known for her efforts in helping to pass the 19th Amendment, which granted women the right to vote. Her home and interpretive center are all open to the public, and that's also in Charles City. So that's kind of a neat thing.
Is there any sporting things? Is there anything that people can do for outdoor activities? Anything unique?
Something new that I have actually not had a chance to experience yet, but it sounds really cool. They have this whitewater rafting.
I've heard about this.
On the Cedar River, which sounds pretty neat.
I've seen actually some videos and pictures. So a good friend of ours, Katie Flint, has done a lot of work blogging and writing in Charles City. I've read a lot of her posts, and that looks really cool. So if you are an outdoor adventurer or adventurist, you will love this. So you can grab a kayak and you can whitewater raft, right? So I don't even know how much of that river they blocked off, but they formed rapids.
Yeah, which just sounds very cool. So hopefully we'll be able to experience that soon too.
I was going to say, I'm going to say this wrong, and you can correct me. That's fine. I was going to say maybe a little less than a quarter of a mile. I mean, it goes down, and you can get out and go back in and go back down again. I think it looks just awesome. So, and that's in Iowa,
right?
How
yes,
cool
it
is that?
One other place I want to talk about is Wildwood Park and Golf Course.
Wildwood.
I have so many good memories of that park, just with when I was little, going with my mom and other moms and friends and high school friends. We'd have family gatherings there, and we've had some birthday parties there and been to some weddings there. It's just a really cool park, and I just have lots of good memories there. I know it has a nice golf course. I'm not really into golf, but for those that are, it's a great golf course.
Golfing, and you say Wildwood. I'm just kind of closing me. I know a little bit. I remember just a little bit about it. Pretty woodsy, right?
It's pretty woodsy.
Okay, so that golf course, think about this, there's trees everywhere, and it's kind of pretty challenging golf course, probably.
I'm guessing.
And there's
I don't
like
know for sure.
a river or a stream or something that kind of goes through there.
Yes, that you drive your car over.
No way.
Yeah.
I remember that
cool.
a little bit. That's why I kind of brought that up. I thought that was kind of neat. Like, you drive over it? So that's kind of neat as well.
Yeah, or you wait in it.
That's neat. As we are coming to a close with talking about Charles City, and again, just touching on some memories here that Tami had, love to do even more about Charles City. So get a hold of us. Love to come to town and see what we can work out there. But any last closing memory, it can be anything that you can remember growing up in Charles City.
I think Charles City is what influenced me to love small town living.
So you bring up that you really feel that was what made you love living in a small town. Any restaurant that you maybe wanted to stop at when you were a kid?
Well, we loved the A&W that we would visit once we came down the Main Street hill.
You had an A&W. Oh my god! But the A&W, I remember we didn't have the A&W. We had a barrel restaurant, but they're very similar. When you went to the A&W, what was so special?
Well, it was special because you would order at the, what do you even call that?
Right, they had the menu outdoors.
Outdoors, and then they would bring your root beer and
on
your
roller
things
skates?
to you. I don't remember if it was on roller skates, but I remember they would bring it in glasses.
Yeah, in real glass, not plastic.
Right.
Right, the real
And then
deal.
they would set it onto your window.
Yeah.
On a tray.
And I think
Kind of fun.
Fun, but you think about that, and you're like, how did they not drop that and have broken glass everywhere? Or
Right.
when they put it on your car, you think like, you're going to scratch my car. You think that would do something,
True.
but that was how it was.
It's how it was. And everybody's car survived, I think.
That's a great memory, actually. So as we kind of come to a close here, just want to remind you again that you can drop us an email at midwestsmalltown@gmail.com or follow us on midwestsmalltown.com. Again, consider following along if you will, but we are going to be covering small towns. We'll keep on going down the road. I know Tammy's going to be interviewing me next.
Interviewing Dan.
So 3, we're going to talk about going a little further west to the northwest corner of Iowa to the small town of Cherokee. Again, we appreciate you following along, and as we say on this channel, go small, come home.